An EF5 tornado, winds over 200 miles per hour, had just carved a 6-mile path through the heart of an American city.
Once again, that tornado just to the south of us on the ground. We can see it on our tower cam.
Absolutely, and
once again, this is producing a lot of precipitation. If you go outside, you may not be able to see it. Take shelter now.
Whitworth, Interstate 44 between mile markers 4 and 42 will also be impacted by this tornado. Once again, the National Weather Service in Springfield has issued a tornado warning for northern Newton County and southern Jasper County, as well as western Lawrence County.
Rance Yunga was closing up his Pronto Pharmacy on a Sunday evening in Joplin, Missouri, May 22nd, 2011. Ordinary day. He'd heard the sirens earlier, but that was nothing new. This was tornado country. Sirens went off all the time. He walked to the back door, opened it, and saw the wall moving toward him like something alive. You couldn't see a funnel, he'd say later. It was just so massive. Across town, Natalie Gonzalez was in her bathtub, her 9-year-old son Augie huddled next to her, her boyfriend, the puppy. She'd thrown a blanket over them, a pillow. And then, in the last seconds before impact, she did something that would save her son's life. She made him put on his bicycle helmet. The sound came first. A constant rumble. Not thunder, not wind. A freight train that never passed. And then the world came apart. 38 minutes. That's how long the Joplin tornado stayed on the ground. 38 minutes of 200 miles per hour winds carving through the heart of a mid-sized American city. 38 minutes that killed 161 people and injured more than 1,100 others. 38 minutes. That changed everything.
Firing line. It's right there. Oh. Yeah. Yahoo!
This is actually really, really bad.
Yeah, it is really, really bad for this town.
It is.
No,
oh my God.
God.
Oh, look at the power flashes.
That's 135.
Oh, please, lift. Lift for Christ's sake.
City and bloody big. The traffic lights are off, so they lost power in the city now.
Lift.
Oh my God. All the street lights and the traffic is off.
Right there. Where? Right behind us. 4 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jesus. Oh my God. Oh shit.
That means it's past this though.
You can see the monster. You can see the web. Oh shit. You can see the rain wrapping there.
Freaking go, people.
Go, just go. Oh no, alright, it's behind him. Oh good. Good God. This is bad, really bad. Jesus. This is bad. That's a monster, this.
Oh, explosion.
Oh my God.
Power flash.
Oh,
That's
it
a
is
monster,
right there.
man.
I feel sick right now. Very sick. Jesus Christ. Oh no, no.
Oh my God, this thing's massive.
Oh, there goes power. Oh my God.
You guys see it back there?
Yes. It's a monster.
It's right
It's
behind
huge.
us. It's a 3-inch.
The Joplin tornado remains the deadliest single tornado in the United States since modern record-keeping began in 1950. It killed 161 people. It injured over 1,150. It caused $3.9 billion in damage adjusted for inflation, making it the costliest tornado on record. 7th deadliest in all of U.S. history. The worst disaster in 70 years. But here's the part that keeps disaster researchers awake at night. They had 17 minutes of warning. The National Weather Service issued a tornado warning at 5:17 p.m. Central Time. The tornado didn't touch down until 5:34. 17 minutes. In the world of meteorology, that's a success. That's above the national average. That should have been enough. 161 people died anyway. This is the story of a systems failure. A case where accurate science, adequate warnings, and modern infrastructure all existed. Yet the last mile broke down catastrophically. We'll investigate the meteorology that created a monster, the warning paradox that left people exposed, the structural engineering failures that turned safe rooms into death traps, the medical disaster inside a modern hospital, and the recovery model that became a blueprint for the nation. But most importantly, we'll answer the question that haunts Joplin to this day. Why did 161 people die when they had 17 minutes to take shelter? The answer isn't what you think.
Oh my goodness. Oh, the power flash is going on. Oh my God. Oh, that was really right there. It's right there. Holy shit. Oh my God. no, this is so bad. No, we're alright. No, I'm not worried about us. I'm worried about the town. I'm worried about this town. This poor town's about to be destroyed.
On the morning of May 22nd, 2011, meteorologists at the National Weather Service in Springfield, Missouri, were tracking a developing weather system over the Central Plains. The thermodynamics looked impressive. Convective available potential energy, CAPE, was exceeding 4,000 joules per kilogram. That's rocket fuel for thunderstorms. Extreme instability. But here's the contradiction. The storm relative helicity, the measure of rotational potential in the lower atmosphere, was modest, around 100 to 150 meters squared per second. Not particularly threatening. Early assessments suggested the primary risk would be large hail, maybe some straight-line winds, not violent tornadoes. The forecasters were looking at an environment that seemed unfavorable for the kind of event that was about to unfold.
Trees down. We're getting numerous reports of trees down, houses damaged, several houses. I just had another caller say a couple of houses damaged over by St. John's Hospital. Apparently the roads are closed over there. Trees are all over.
The synoptic setup was textbook severe weather. A deep surface low-pressure system sat over the northern plains. A cold front extended southward into Kansas. A dry line bulged into Oklahoma. This is what meteorologists call a triple point, where the cold front, dry line, and warm front interact. It's a classic breeding ground for supercells. But the mesoscale environment, the smaller scale details, was evolving in ways the models hadn't fully captured. An outflow boundary from morning convection was acting as a focal point. It was generating low-level vorticity, spinning up the atmosphere near the surface. And as the afternoon progressed, the shear profiles improved significantly. That storm relative helicity, the rotation measured doubled in the hour before the tornado. It jumped from 150 to near 300 meters squared per second in the vicinity of Joplin. The environment went from unfavorable to hostile in less than 60 minutes.
When the first warning sirens went off indicating that a huge tornado was about to hit Joplin, Missouri, most residents either ignored the initial warning or moved slowly to take shelter. That's the assessment of a new government report. It concludes that most residents who were surveyed said they did not go to shelters right away after hearing the first warning. Instead, they tried to get additional confirmation about the danger.
And then the cell merger happened. The Joplin supercell didn't develop in isolation. It was part of a cluster of storms interacting along the cold front. A secondary cell merged with the primary storm's rear flank downdraft, the curtain of cool, sinking air on the backside of the supercell. That merger injected precipitation loading and momentum into the system.
Listen to it!
High-resolution computer simulations run after the event identified a specific mechanism called a descending reflectivity core. The merger amplified this process. It increased updraft velocity by altering the vertical pressure gradients. It intensified low-level rotation by surging the rear flank downdraft, which increased surface convergence and vorticity stretching. And it triggered tornadogenesis, the rapid descent of the mesocyclone to the surface. The mainstream explanation is clear. Rapid mesoscale modification created a localized environment far more hostile than the broader synoptic picture suggested. But there's an alternative angle. Some researchers argue that the operational forecasting models simply lack the resolution to capture these small-scale interactions in real time. The cell merger mechanism was understood in theory, but not predictable in practice. What doesn't fully fit? Why the storm relative helicity increase wasn't flagged earlier by the mesoanalysis algorithms? The data was there, but the synthesis, the putting it all together, happened too slowly. The best current interpretation is that the Joplin tornado was the product of a perfect storm of mesoscale interactions that evolved faster than operational models could predict. The storm surprised even the meteorologists watching it.
Kind of scared.
And that matters because even when warnings go out, the forecaster's confidence level shapes how those warnings are communicated. If meteorologists expect hail, they emphasize hail. If they're uncertain about tornado potential, that uncertainty trickles down. The storm evolved into something deadlier than anyone anticipated. But the warnings did go out 17 minutes early. So why didn't people take shelter?
We just survived a tornado, folks.
That sucked.
What do you think, babe?
Hey, I'm scared.
You were scared. We were all scared.
We were all scared.
Show them where we huddled it out, Gene.
That's where we huddled it out.
Right there. Right. Were we under the B or we were under the...
I think we were
No,
under
we were
the
right
B.
there by that. We were, no, because we stayed underneath the on.
No, we didn't. No.
5:17 p.m. Central Time. The National Weather Service in Springfield issues a tornado warning for Joplin. The polygon, a computer-generated shape targeting the specific storm cell, overlays the city. Weather radios activate in homes across town. Television stations break into programming. And at 5:11 p.m., the sirens had already sounded once for 3 minutes. 17 minutes before the tornado touches down. 19 minutes before it enters the city limits. By every operational metric, this is a meteorological success. But 161 people died. Here's the contradiction. The warning system worked perfectly on the technical side. The radar detected rotation. The forecasters issued the polygon. The sirens blared. The information reached the public. And yet, the majority of Joplin residents did not immediately take shelter.
5:40 p.m. on Sunday afternoon, Joplin, Missouri was hit by a deadly tornado. Here's what it looked like. We could see it on radar. It was part of a supercell thunderstorm, the whole precipitation pattern spiraling its way around because of the rotating updraft about here that comprises the supercell thunderstorm. These pink and lavender areas are hail that are wrapping around the storm. This ball, though, is a debris ball. That is the tornado in progress about a mile wide.
The first siren activation at 5:11 p.m. was for a different storm. Polygon number 30. It covered northern Joplin, a separate thunderstorm cell that was producing funnel clouds to the west in Kansas. Residents heard that siren, then checked the television and saw the warning was for the northern part of the county. Many assumed the threat was elsewhere.
Going across Joplin, Missouri, we have the velocities with that showing the strong winds. The red's going southbound, the green's going eastbound. That's the tornado right there near the J&O in Joplin. I took a slice through this. The tornado debris that makes up that debris ball were being tossed nearly 20,000 feet in the air. There's the tornado. It's debris being cast up, giving it a very high return on Doppler radar, about 18,000 feet above the ground.
6 minutes later, at 5:17, the sirens sounded again, this time for the actual Joplin tornado, polygon number 31. But here's the problem. Joplin had no standardized protocol for multiple siren activations in quick succession. 2 sirens, 6 minutes apart. Some residents interpreted the second siren as an all-clear signal. Others thought it was a test. Still others figured the first warning had been extended, so the threat was the same storm they'd already dismissed. Confusion compounded by habituation.
Oh my God, that is so crazy. That tornado is going.
Once again, that tornado just to the south of us on the ground. We can see it on our tower cam.
Oh my God.
Once again, this is producing a lot of precipitation. If If you go outside, you may not be able to see it. Take shelter now. It looks like this is a pretty powerful tornado. You can see that it was taking
Oh my
out
God.
transformers. It continues to
Oh
push
my God.
on to the east.
Yes, I've never seen one, and that's live. Emma, get over here!
Oh, that's what, she's alright. I was just trying to figure out what that noise was.
Cover from this storm.
Oh my goodness.
You can see that tornado on the ground from our tower cam. We are continuing to track that.
Joplin tested its sirens every week, audibly, the full wail, for years. And the national false alarm rate for tornado warnings was, and still is, 74%. 3 out of 4 tornado warnings don't result in a tornado striking the warned area. It's not that meteorologists are bad at their jobs. It's that issuing a warning requires erring on the side of caution. Better to warn and be wrong than to stay silent and be catastrophically right.
Oh my gosh, that's Joplin.
It is certainly going off. Caitlin, I'm just looking out the door right now. Please do not go outside and try to track this storm, folks.
Oh my
You
God.
can't see anything outside. It is rain wrapped. This is a dangerous, dangerous situation at this point in time. We're going to continue to track this storm at this point in time.
I don't think it's going to hit our station. We don't need to do that. But take shelter anyways.
Yeah, take
Oh my
shelter
God.
immediately, folks. If you can hear us, if we are still able to broadcast, we need to take shelter. If you are
This is crazy.
at this point in time, please.
But the psychological consequence is siren fatigue. Residents in tornado-prone areas learn to view sirens as a signal to seek more information, not a signal to seek shelter immediately. And so they engaged in what disaster sociologists call milling. They turned on the TV. They called neighbors. They walked outside to look at the sky. Rance Jung, the pharmacy owner, didn't check outside until his computer started flickering. Reuben Carter, working at a fast trip gas station, noted that a regular customer rushed in during the tornado warning to stock up on cigarettes. Life continued as normal.
Major damage at 32nd. There went a power. Major damage over on 32nd Street, he just said. And I just saw a transformer blow. Yeah, ours did too. Yep, I just saw another transformer blow.
Most critically, residents wanted visual confirmation. They wanted to see the tornado, but the Joplin tornado was rain-wrapped. It was embedded in a high-precipitation supercell, a storm that produces so much rain and hail that the tornado itself is obscured. Looking west from Joplin, residents wouldn't see a classic funnel. They'd see a dark, amorphous wall of water and clouds. They waited until the rumble turned into a roar and the windows started shaking, and by then it was too late to get to the safest part of the house.
I can feel the windows shaking.
Feel the house start shaking.
Yeah.
The mainstream explanation is that psychological factors, siren fatigue, confirmation-seeking behavior, optimism, bias delayed, protective action. Residents genuinely didn't believe the threat was imminent. But there's an alternative framing. This was a system design failure. The transition from county-based warnings to storm-based polygons was relatively new in 2011. It was scientifically superior targeting specific areas instead of blanketing entire counties. But it created confusion. Sirens might sound for an entire county even if the polygon only covered part of it. Or conversely, sirens might not sound in areas just outside the polygon that were still at risk. And when 2 warnings overlapped in 6 minutes, with no clear protocol for distinguishing them, the system's precision became its vulnerability. What doesn't fully fit? Why visual confirmation remains so critical even for residents who had NOAA weather radios and were actively watching television? The information was there. The warnings were explicit. Yet the instinct to see the threat overpowered the data.
Stations, National Weather Service has issued a tornado warning for western Jasper County until 1800 hours. National Weather Service Doppler radar indicated a tornado 10 miles west of Carl Junction or 6 miles east of Columbus, moving east at 30 miles per hour. Storm has a history of producing funnel clouds and tennis ball-size hail. Time of dispatch, 1713.
The best interpretation is that the warnings failed at the last mile, the sociological link between information and action. You can have perfect radar, perfect forecasts, perfect dissemination, but if the human psychology isn't accounted for, if the communication doesn't cut through apathy and confusion, people won't act. Technology can't save lives if the message doesn't land. "5:34 p.m. The tornado touches down just west of Joplin, near the junction of J.J. Highway and West 32nd Street. Weather spotters report a funnel on the ground. It's weak at first. Multiple vortices, smaller subvortices, are visible, rotating around the main circulation. Classic multi-vortex structure. But within 4 minutes, everything changes. By 5:38 p.m., the tornado is an EF4 wedge, nearly a mile wide, winds exceeding 180 miles per hour. It has exploded from a nascent funnel into a city-destroying monster in the time it takes to brew a pot of coffee. 4 minutes from touchdown to peak intensity. The timeline of destruction is startlingly precise. 5:34. Touchdown west of the city limits. Trees toppled. Spotters confirm it's on the ground. 5:38. The tornado reaches EF4 intensity as it crosses into Joplin proper. The width expands to nearly a mile. The parent circulation is now a solid wedge, wider than it is tall.
This is a Joplin storm chaser. I have a large destructive tornado and on the southwest side of Joplin. Notified, large tornado on the ground doing massive damage. Large tornado, it's a maxi wedge on the ground. It's tearing up the entire city on the south side of Joplin right now. This is Jeff Petrosky, and it's a massive tornado doing massive destruction.
5:41. The tornado strikes St. John's Regional Medical Center. 183 patients are inside. The 9-story steel and concrete structure takes a direct hit. From there, the path is a diagonal slash through the heart of Joplin, west to east, slightly northeast. Street Mary's Catholic Church is leveled. Only the steel cross and a fragment of metal roofing remain. Joplin High School sections of the building completely destroyed. A school bus is tossed onto the roof of the destroyed bus garage. East Middle School, Home Depot, Walmart, Academy Sports, the Pepsi Distribution Center, the Cummins Generator Building. The tornado crosses Range Line Road, the main commercial corridor. Well-constructed buildings are scoured to their foundations. Asphalt parking lots are stripped clean. Concrete parking stops, each weighing 200 to 300 pounds and rebared into the pavement, are plucked from the ground and thrown 60 yards.
I can make it out. I can barely make it out. We're in the rear flank right now. There's the tornado right there in front of us.
It crosses Interstate 44 near the junction with Highway 249. Cars and trucks are blown off the highway. Semi-trailers are rolled into balls of twisted metal. Highway signs are mangled into abstract sculptures.
There is the tornado.
And then, slowly, the tornado weakens. It crosses into rural Jasper and Newton counties. Damage drops to EF0 and EF1 levels. Trees down. Mobile homes damaged. Outbuildings collapsed.
Oh, there's a hail. Here comes the hail.
We don't need that either.
At 6:12 p.m., the tornado lifts east of Diamond, Missouri. 38 minutes after it touched down. Total path length, 21.62 miles. Peak width, nearly 1 mile.
Sure. All right, let me show you this also. Amazing images from Google Earth GeoEye of a before picture of Joplin, Missouri. This is before Sunday when the EF5 tornado rolled on through. Watch the after. Over 200 mile per hour winds just totally wiped the city off the map. And you can see on the right-hand side, that's the after picture. No standing structures at all.
I mean, look at the way the housing development.
It's absolutely amazing.
Goes across that.
Go through the baseball field, the football field, it's scattered debris all over. Even the color of the ground. It's springtime. Stuff is blooming. It's supposed to be green. It's just torn up.
Look at that. Look at the way that development is gone.
It's just unbelievable. So that was a before.
Here's what makes this event uniquely catastrophic. The tornado was moving slowly, only 15 miles per hour through Joplin. A typical tornado might race across the landscape at 30 or 40 miles per hour, limiting the time any one location is exposed to peak winds. But Joplin sat in the blender for minutes, a spinning 200 miles per hour wind field, taking its time.
We were in our neighbor's basement, thank God, just right across the street here.
Now, not many people have basements around here.
No, we're very fortunate.
We had about 25 or 30 seconds notice, and we kept watching and listening, and then we decided we better go across the street. And then my neighbor and I kept trying to see the funnel, and we couldn't see the funnel. But then there was two large strikes, bolt lightning strikes, and then we started hearing some cracking and popping, and so then we decided it was time to get to the basement. There was 6 of us in the basement.
Major noise once it got close, I mean major.
We could hear the roof being taken off, and
it's loud popping. It could have been bricks throwing together, cars, I don't know. It was the loudest thing I've ever heard.
We kept watching the television.
38 minutes on the ground is rare. Most tornadoes last 10 minutes or less. The combination of long duration, slow forward speed, and peak intensity occurring directly over the most densely populated part of the city created a worst-case scenario.
I am traversing through the storm damage, and this hopefully should give you a picture of the wrath that all these storms are giving, even 48 hours after the F5 tornado has hit this city. Sideways pelting rain, high winds, and almost inconceivable conditions. The temperature has dropped. The tornado sirens have gone off here in Joplin, Missouri.
The debris indicators tell the story of violence. Manhole covers were ripped from the streets and thrown. Tractor-trailers vehicles weighing tens of thousands of pounds were lofted and carried. The National Weather Service found vehicles that had been rolled so violently they'd been crushed into spheres of metal and shattered glass.
All right, here's the gas station that we were at. This would have been where we walked in. We would have gone right here.
Tens of thousands of trees were snapped or uprooted. The satellite imagery from NASA shows a brown scar across the city, visible from space. Even 2 months later, the tornado's path was etched into the landscape. Joplin followed the latest building codes, the International Building Code, state-level amendments, inspections. This wasn't a city cutting corners. The structures were built to standard, and 30% of the city was destroyed anyway. 7,400 homes were damaged or destroyed. St. John's Regional Medical Center was gutted. Joplin High School collapsed in sections. Home Depot's walls fell like dominoes, killing 7 people in the front of the store. Start with residential construction, the majority of the destruction. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, conducted a forensic analysis after the tornado. What they found was a pervasive lack of what engineers call vertical load path continuity. That's a technical way of saying the roof wasn't properly connected to the walls, and the walls weren't properly anchored to the foundation. Many homes relied on toe nailing to connect roof trusses to the top plates of walls. Toe nailing is driving nails at an angle through the truss into the wood below. It's cheap, it's fast, And under tornadic uplift, it fails at wind speeds as low as 135 miles per hour, EF2 range, not even close to the 200+ miles per hour winds at the tornado's peak. Once the roof is gone, the walls lose lateral support. They collapse outward. The structure pancakes. NIST also found that many homes had bolted sill plates, the base of the wall frame, attached to the concrete foundation, but no washers under the bolts. Under extreme uplift, the wood pulled through the bolt holes. The foundation anchoring failed. And here's the critical detail. 82% of homes in Joplin lacked basements. This is southwest Missouri. Tornado Alley, a region known for violent storms. And 8 out of 10 homes had no below-ground shelter option. Residents were told to go to an interior room, away from windows, on the lowest floor, a bathroom, a hallway, a closet. But if the house is swept from its foundation, the interior room goes with it. 183 patients were inside St. John's Regional Medical Center when the tornado struck at 5:41 p.m. It was one of 2 hospitals serving the Joplin metro area. A modern 9-story facility, steel-reinforced concrete, built to code. This was supposed to be the safest place in the city, but when the tornado hit, the hospital became a death trap. Staff had moved patients into the hallway's standard tornado protocol: get away from windows, interior corridors, lie flat. Judy Miller was there with her husband and their daughter Julie. Julie was a patient, typically in a wheelchair. When the warning came, hospital staff moved her into the hallway on a hospital bed. The sound came first, the rumble. Then, the building started shaking. "Here it comes," someone said. And then the windows exploded. Judy Miller watched as patients around her were impaled by pieces of the building. Broken legs, head injuries, bleeding everywhere. "It looked like a bomb had gone off in the middle of that building," she'd say later. And then, suddenly, the roar stopped. Silence. Julie turned to her mother. "Listen." Judy listened. "I don't hear anything," she said. "Exactly. Mom, there are no sirens. Nobody's coming." The hospital was dark. The emergency generators, housed in a separate building designed to lower wind standards, had been destroyed. No lights, no ventilators, no communication systems. The smell of smoke began filling the hallways. They waited. The injuries around them were severe. People needed help, but the help wasn't coming. Eventually, they began moving debris themselves. They transferred Julie to a chair, started clearing a path to the stairwell. When they reached the stairwell door, it was jammed, debris blocking it from the other side. More than a dozen people died inside St. John's Regional Medical Center that night. Not from the building collapsing, the structural frame held, but from the functional failure, the envelope breach, the projectiles, the darkness, the loss of critical systems. The best interpretation is that hospital design prioritized structural integrity over operational continuity. The building was engineered to not collapse. This single failure, St. John's going dark, became the driving force behind the shift to functional recovery standards in critical facility design. Hospitals built after Joplin are required. Within 24 hours of the tornado, more than 800 police cars, 300 ambulances, and 400 fire trucks arrived in Joplin, 1,100 emergency responders, 400 public safety agencies from 5 states, Missouri National Guard, Highway Patrol, search and rescue teams, federal disaster mortuary teams. It was a massive, coordinated response, but the roads were impassable, the power was out, the cell towers were destroyed, and 3 million cubic yards of debris covered everything. 45 minutes after the tornado lifted, the Red Cross opened an emergency shelter in the gymnasium at Missouri Southern State University. The college campus, just outside the tornado's path, became the staging location for the entire response. First responders lived in the dorms. The Federal Disaster Mortuary Team, the specialists who identify bodies, set up operations on campus.
Here. Dang, these guys got hit good over here.
Oh! Oh!
Ooh. Governor Jay Nixon declared a state of emergency and activated the Missouri National Guard. 191 personnel deployed immediately, with 2,000 more on standby. The Missouri State Highway Patrol sent 180 troopers to assist with law enforcement and rescue. 25 ambulance strike teams arrived, a fleet of emergency vehicles that would have been overwhelming under normal conditions. But these weren't normal conditions. The infrastructure was gone. Roads were blocked by debris, not just tree branches, but cars, sections of buildings, telephone poles. Power lines were down across every major artery, and communication was nearly impossible. Cell towers had been destroyed, landlines were severed. Emergency responders couldn't coordinate by radio in many areas because the repeater stations were offline. By May 23rd, Missouri Task Force 1 arrived. 85 personnel, 4 search dogs, heavy equipment, 5 additional heavy rescue teams deployed the next day. They began the grim work of searching for missing persons.
Okay, right down the left. Don't even stop, just go. Go, get the hell out of here.
You could stand in one spot, survivors would say later, and do a full 360-degree turn and see nothing but damage. No reference points, no landmarks, every street sign gone, every tree down. The debris field was so extensive that searchers had to mark areas with spray paint to track which piles had been checked. The visual aftermath was apocalyptic. 3 million cubic yards of residential debris. That's enough to fill a football field to a depth of over 400 feet. Manhole covers were missing, ripped from the streets and thrown. Asphalt parking lots had been scoured clean. The pavement peeled away. Vehicles were crushed into unrecognizable shapes. Tens of thousands of trees down.
Huh? For a while. Yep, 28.
Another survivor described the mud. Not ordinary mud. A paste, ground up with everything wood, insulation, vegetation, debris. It coated walls, clung to everything, had a distinct smell you couldn't forget. If you'd been through it, you'd recognize it instantly years later in photographs.
Partly because of years of false alarms. 162 people died in the disaster. The report says most residents didn't respond to the first sirens because of an apparent disregard for them. But the government meteorologist who led the assessment team says it's not clear if the slow response actually wound up costing lives. And the report stresses that the combined efforts from the Weather Service, emergency management, and the public did save lives.
The mainstream explanation for the response's success, despite the infrastructure collapse, is human coordination. Traditional emergency management assumes functioning roads, power, and communications. Joplin had none of those. But by staging everything at the university, a single physical location, responders could coordinate face-to-face, no technology required. What doesn't fully fit is how quickly mutual aid arrived and integrated. 400 agencies from 5 states converging on a city in chaos, operating without centralized digital communication, it should have been a logistical nightmare. But the ground reports suggest it worked, largely because everyone defaulted to in-person coordination. In the days after the tornado, a narrative began to emerge. The Joplin miracle. Look how many survived. It could have been so much worse. Here's the problem with that framing. 161 people dead is not a miracle. It's a failure. And 96% of them died from blunt force trauma inside their own homes. Many in the very rooms they'd been told were safe. The death toll analysis reveals something disturbing. Many victims were killed in interior rooms, hallways, bathrooms, closets. The places designated as tornado shelters. Not because they made bad decisions, because the structures were completely swept away. If the house goes, the interior room goes with it. But survival was wildly variable, sometimes random, often determined by micro-scale decisions and pure chance. Natalie Gonzalez and her son Augie survived in a bathtub. She'd thrown a blanket and pillow over him, and at the last second, she made him put on his bicycle helmet. She'd heard somewhere that helmets protect kids during hurricanes. The tornado hit. The toilet ripped from the floor and flew up, striking Augie in the head and Judy in the back. The bicycle helmet saved his life. At a Fast Trip gas station, 24 strangers took shelter in the walk-in cooler. Reuben Carter, the employee working that evening, ushered them in. The building above them was destroyed. The cooler held. All 24 survived. Lee Humphrey, at the Hampshire Terrace Apartments, saw the sky turn black with a strip of purple. "I don't ever want to see that again," he'd say. He survived, and the experience changed his life. He quit drugs and drinking, learned to forgive himself and others. Brian Head, the city attorney, was doing laundry when the power went out. Like any typical Midwestern guy, he opened the front door to check the weather, then ran to the hallway and hunkered down. His house survived, though it needed major repairs. Most of his neighbors' homes were gone. And then there was the mucormycosis cluster. 5 people died in the weeks and months after the tornado from a rare, potentially fatal fungal infection, cutaneous mucormycosis. The tornado had driven soil and vegetative debris deep into survivors' skin. The fungus, normally harmless in the environment, became deadly when embedded in tissue. It added a biological dimension to the trauma. The lead contamination created another hidden threat. 40% of yards in southern Joplin were re-exposed to chunks of raw lead ore from the historic mining operations. Children playing in those yards, families rebuilding, all faced an invisible hazard that would take years and $5 million in EPA grants to clean up. The mainstream explanation for the death toll is that survival was determined by building performance and micro-scale positioning. If your house was well built, you survived. If it wasn't, you might not. If you were in the right hallway, you lived. If you were in the wrong one, you didn't. But there's an alternative framing. Some survivors attribute their survival to specific good decisions. Sheltering in basements, taking cover in coolers, using bicycle helmets. These weren't random. They were choices that increased survival odds. What doesn't fully fit is the house-to-house variability. Why did some homes withstand EF5 winds while identical homes next door were swept away? The answer likely involves construction quality, variation, how carefully the builder installed the foundation anchors, whether they used hurricane straps, how well the inspector caught mistakes. But that variability was invisible until the tornado exposed it. This wasn't divine intervention. This wasn't a miracle. It was chaos, with random outcomes amplified by poor building standards and invisible construction defects. Framing it as a miracle obscures the systemic failures that caused preventable deaths. 161 people died because the buildings weren't designed to protect them and the warnings didn't change behavior fast enough. The survivors, those who made it through 38 minutes of hell, faced a new challenge, rebuilding a city that had lost 30% of its buildings, replacing homes, schools, hospitals, infrastructure. But the hardest question was this: do we rebuild it the same way, or do we finally admit the old approach failed? By May of 2012, 1 year after the tornado, the city of Joplin was issuing building permits for nearly 5 new homes per day. The recovery was ferocious, aggressive, fast. But here's the contradiction. The city rejected a proposal to mandate storm shelters, safe rooms, in all new residential construction. The very vulnerability that killed 161 people was being rebuilt into the city. Joplin's recovery became a national case study because of the Citizens Advisory Recovery Team. Recognizing that top-down government planning often alienates survivors, the city established TEAM as a citizen-led body. Local business leaders, residents, school officials, they organized massive listening sessions, hundreds of people showing up to community meetings, sticky notes, public voting on priorities. It gave the traumatized community a sense of agency, control. One of the first priorities, schools. The schools first strategy. Rebuild the schools immediately to restore normalcy for children and prevent mass out-migration of families. If parents couldn't get their kids into school, they'd leave. Joplin would lose its population base. Federal officials had warned the city to expect a 25% population loss, its standard for disasters of this magnitude. Joplin defied the prediction. The population held steady. And the volunteer surge was extraordinary. 26,000. 800 individuals from across the country put in 755,300 hours of community service in the first year. That's the equivalent of 82 years of full-time work. Habitat for Humanity. Faith-based groups. AmeriCorps deployed 350 members to Joplin. They removed debris, helped with casework, coordinated donations, operated warehouses. By 2022, the city was building an average of 5 houses per week. New businesses opened, old businesses rebuilt. 4,000 building permits for residential repairs and new construction in the first year alone. But underneath the success story was a tension, a debate, a compromise. Should the city mandate storm shelters in all new residential construction? Proponents argued it was obvious. An EF5 can strike again. Joplin is in Tornado Alley. The same vulnerability that killed 161 people still exists. Every new house should have a hardened core, a safe room built to ICC 500 standards, capable of withstanding 250 miles per hour winds. Opponents argued cost. Adding a safe room to new construction increases the price by several $1,000s. For low-income families who had lost everything, that could be the difference between rebuilding in Joplin or leaving. The mandate would stall recovery, price people out. The Joplin City Council voted against the mandate. The compromise: incentivize safe rooms, provide grants and subsidies, build hardened community shelters and schools, but don't require them in private homes. The result? Most new homes were rebuilt without mandatory storm shelters. The schools got EF5 rated shelters. The public facilities got hardened infrastructure. But the residential vulnerability that caused the majority of the deaths remained. The mainstream explanation is economic pragmatism. Affordable rebuilding was prioritized over safety mandates. The city chose speed and accessibility over resilience. But there's an alternative framing. This was short-sighted. The next tornado, and there will be a next tornado, will expose the same vulnerabilities. Joplin had a once-in-a-generation opportunity to rebuild safely. They chose not to. What doesn't fully fit is the inconsistency. Schools got mandated shelters, fire stations, police stations, critical facilities, all required to have hardened cores. But homes, where most people spend most of their time, didn't. The risk acceptance is inconsistent. The best interpretation is that TEAM empowered the community but deferred the hardest safety decisions. The listening sessions gave people agency. The school's first strategy prevented population loss. The volunteer surge rebuilt the physical city. But the vulnerability that killed 161 people still exists in new construction. The stakes are clear. The next EF5 that hits Joplin will test whether the lessons were learned or whether the same mistakes were rebuilt into the foundation. But the scars weren't just physical. The psychological damage ran deeper. And, unlike the buildings, it didn't fade with time. 2.5 years after the tornado, researchers conducted a follow-up mental health survey of Joplin survivors. The results were shocking. 27% met the criteria for probable PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. That's not the shocking part. The shocking part is that the rate had increased since the 6-month mark. Trauma is supposed to fade with time. Joplin's trauma intensified. The traditional model of disaster trauma goes like this. Acute stress peaks immediately after the event. Over weeks and months, it fades. Some individuals develop chronic PTSD, but for most people, the passage of time brings healing. Joplin didn't follow that pattern. The longitudinal studies showed delayed onset and increasing rates of PTSD. At 6 months, the numbers were elevated but manageable. At 2.5 years, they'd climbed. Nearly 3 in 10 survivors met diagnostic criteria. The neurological and psychological mechanism is cumulative stress. The immediate trauma of the tornado is acute, but then comes the chronic exposure. Living in a debris field for months, driving past empty lots where neighbors' homes used to stand. Anniversary triggers. Every time May 22nd rolls around, the anxiety spikes. Re-traumatization during rebuilding contractors, insurance disputes, financial stress. It compounds. Psychiatrist Charles Graves, who worked with Joplin survivors, described it as a shared trauma, creating an environmental hit to the entire population. It's not just individual PTSD, it's collective trauma embedded in the landscape. Tiffany Stout, a survivor, described it this way. You can look around the room when there's a tornado watch at work and know who's been through something like this. I have to talk to myself like, okay, breathe. You can't start crying. You can't freak out. Keep it together. Let's be logical. The physical response doesn't fade. It gets triggered over and over. Ashley Micklethwaite, who was president of the Joplin School Board when the tornado hit, said, "If you're from here and you look out over the landscape, I still see the scars. I see empty lots, and I know where people died." The city rebuilt, but the survivors see the ghosts. And then there's the suicide data. Research indicated a correlation between the tornado and increased suicide rates in the affected demographics in the years following the event. The long tail of disaster recovery that doesn't show up in property damage reports. Mental health costs that compound silently for years. Recovery anger is another documented phenomenon. In the immediate aftermath, there's an outpouring of support, volunteers, donations, media attention. But as the months drag on, the initial aid fades. The volunteers go home, the donations dry up, the rebuilding slows, and survivors, many of whom are still struggling, become frustrated, angry. Why is this taking so long? Why aren't we getting more help? The anger itself becomes a source of trauma. The mainstream explanation is that long-term exposure to chaos debris, destroyed landmarks, displaced community, creates cumulative psychological damage. The trauma doesn't resolve, it layers. What doesn't fully fit is the individual variability. Why did some survivors show resilience while others deteriorated? The data lacks individual-level longitudinal tracking. We know the aggregate rates increased, but we don't know which specific factors predicted who would develop chronic PTSD. The best interpretation is that the long tail of disaster is unmeasured in official reports. FEMA tracks debris removal, building permits, infrastructure restoration, but the mental health costs compound silently for years, decades even. And the stakes are this. Future disaster planning must budget for long-term psychological support, not just crisis counseling in the first weeks, but sustained mental health services for years. Anniversary support, community healing programs. Joplin's pain wasn't wasted, though. It became the nation's wake-up call. Before Joplin, tornado shelters in schools weren't required anywhere in the United States. Not in Oklahoma, not in Kansas, not in Alabama, nowhere. After Joplin, the building codes changed nationwide. The International Building Code 2015 mandated tornado shelters in K-12 schools, 911 call centers, and fire and police stations in high-risk tornado zones. One disaster, one city, a policy, earthquake. The National Weather Service implemented impact-based warnings. They abandoned the dry, scientific language that had defined weather alerts for decades. No more mesocyclone detected or Doppler radar indicated rotation. Now it's visceral, explicit, urgent, tornado emergency, damage threat, catastrophic. This is a life-threatening situation, not survivable above ground. The goal is to bypass the milling phase, to scream urgency, to cut through the siren fatigue and optimism bias that killed people in Joplin. The language shift acknowledges a hard truth. Scientific accuracy alone is insufficient. Warnings must penetrate psychological apathy. The International Building Code changes were even more sweeping. IBC 2015. Tornado shelters mandated in new critical facilities schools, 911 centers, fire and police stations, in areas that experience the most violent tornadoes. Great Plains, Midwest, Southeast. IBC 2018 extended the mandate to new buildings and additions on existing school campuses. Alabama went further. The state now requires storm shelters in all new classroom and dormitory buildings on public college and university campuses. The ICC 500 standard, the technical specification for tornado shelters, was updated with NIST's data from Joplin. Functional recovery standards for hospitals, not just structural survival. The building has to be able to operate after a direct hit. Generator buildings must be built to the same wind load standards as the main hospital. Envelope integrity windows, curtain walls must be hardened or protected. Backup power systems must be redundant. Joplin's regional siren policy became a model. The city, working with surrounding communities, standardized siren protocols. If you go to the next town over, it's not a completely different system. And they reduced the frequency of full siren tests. No more weekly audible tests. Once a month, non-audible tests for power and connectivity in between. NIST's investigation became the catalyst for all of this. Joplin was a stress test for the nation's disaster readiness. The findings, building failures, communication breakdowns, warning paradoxes were documented in exhaustive technical reports. Those reports informed the code changes. The mainstream explanation is that Joplin was too catastrophic to ignore. 161 dead, $3.9 billion in damage. The deadliest tornado in 70 years. Policy inertia finally broke. But there's an alternative framing. The policy changes were reactive, not proactive. We waited for the disaster to force our hand. The science was available before Joplin. The building vulnerabilities were known. The siren fatigue issue had been documented. But it took 161 deaths to change the rules. What doesn't fully fit is the residential gap. Schools got mandated shelters. Hospitals got functional recovery standards. Critical facilities got hardened infrastructure. But residential construction, where most people spend most of their time, where most of the Joplin deaths occurred, remains largely unregulated. Safe rooms are encouraged, incentivized, but not required. The best interpretation is that Joplin was a never-again moment for public facilities. The policy changes will save lives in schools, hospitals, and emergency operations centers. But private homes remain vulnerable, and the stakes are this. The next Joplin-scale tornado will test whether these changes actually work, whether impact-based warnings overcome siren fatigue, whether functional recovery standards keep hospitals operating. The question that haunted Joplin from the beginning was this. Why did 161 people die when they had 17 minutes of warning? The answer is a three-part failure. First, meteorological surprise. The storm evolved faster than operational models predicted. The cell merger mechanism triggered explosive intensification weak funnel to city-destroying wedge in 4 minutes. Even the forecasters watching it in real time were caught off guard by the speed. Second, sociological breakdown, siren fatigue, milling behavior, 2 warnings in, 6 minutes creating confusion. the instinct to visually confirm the threat before taking shelter. Optimism bias, it won't happen to me. The warnings reached people. But the message didn't land. The last mile broke down. Third, structural inadequacy. Toe-nailing instead of hurricane straps. Foundation anchors without washers. 82% of homes without basements. Buildings designed for life safety, not resilience. Weak links generator buildings, roof connections, envelope integrity causing total failure. A hospital that stood but couldn't operate. Schools that collapsed when roof decks stripped away. 3 failures, compounding, cascading. But the deeper question, the one Joplin's recovery exposes, is this. Are we willing to pay for safety? The city rebuilt fast. 5 homes per day, volunteer surge, schools first. Economic recovery, population held steady. By many metrics, a success. But the safe room mandate was rejected. New homes were rebuilt without hardened cores. The same vulnerability that killed 161 people still exists in the residential construction. We fixed the warnings. Impact-based warnings now scream urgency. We fixed the schools. EF5 rated shelters in every new school in tornado-prone zones. We fixed the hospitals. Functional recovery standards. Hardened generator buildings. But we didn't fix the homes. Stand in Joplin today. You'll see new buildings, new schools, a rebuilt medical center, a thriving downtown. But you'll also see empty lots, gaps in the neighborhoods, places where families died. Ashley Micklethwaite said it. If you're from here and you look out over the landscape, I still see the scars. I know where people died. The city rebuilt, but the survivors see the ghosts. And the next EF5 is coming. Tornadoes don't stop. The science says they may become more frequent, more intense as the climate changes. The plains, the Midwest, the Southeast, these regions will see violent tornadoes again. The question is, will we be ready? Or will we rebuild the same mistakes, the same vulnerabilities, the same compromises between safety and cost? Joplin proved that warnings alone aren't enough, that buildings matter, that the last mile from information to action is where survival is won or lost. 161 people died on May 22, 2011. Not because the science failed, not because the warnings didn't go out. They died because the systems built to protect them, the buildings, the communication protocols, the assumptions about human behavior weren't designed for the monster that showed up. The lessons are written in the wreckage. The policy changes are on the books. The technology is better. But the hardest lesson is the one Joplin couldn't fully embrace. Safety costs money. And until we're willing to mandate it in homes, not just schools, the vulnerability remains. The Joplin tornado was the worst disaster in 70 years. The question that remains is whether it will take another 70 years and another 161 deaths to finish the job.